This morning at Beth Tikvah, we begin a series where I'm excited to give the congregation an opportunity to meet and engage and learn from future leaders of the Jewish community. About 10 years ago, Beth Tikvah's board made the decision to chart an independent course. We disaffiliated from the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. There were many valid reasons to disaffiliate, but at the time, what concerned me most about the decision was the potential loss of a vital understanding, and that is that we are part of a larger religious movement, one that requires strong institutions aside from just our synagogue to thrive. We need institutions to publish our prayer books and disseminate educational materials and foster collaboration on crucial projects, and most importantly, to train the next generation of rabbis. Without well-trained and deeply committed rabbis, our synagogues will not be sustainable. That is why I'm especially grateful for the initiative undertaken in partnership with Beth Tikvah Women this year, this beautiful program that will be welcoming 4 rabbinical school students from the Jewish Theological Seminary, beginning today and until June. This effort gives us a glimpse into the emerging talent preparing to serve the Jewish people. It reminds us that the future of our movement and of Judaism depends on those who dedicate their lives to teaching, leading, and inspiring Jewish communities. This lesson, by the way, is deeply reflected in Parashat, where we find one of the earliest mandates for Jewish continuity. V'higadet alevincha bayom hahu. Make sure you tell your children on that future day, saying, "It is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt." The Torah in this morning's Parsha makes it clear that the survival of the Jewish people depends upon the passing down of traditions, wisdom, and faith to the next generation. It is not enough to preserve the past. We have to invest in the future by nurturing committed leaders who will guide our communities with knowledge and devotion. Today, we're delighted to welcome back rabbinical student Eitan Bloostein back to Beth Tikvah. He is a 4th-year rabbinical student at JTS, and I say welcome back because he came here several years ago when he was just a 1st-year student. He's a proud product of the Boston Jewish community, where he attended Solomon Schechter Day School and Gan Academy. He studied at Yeshivat Ma'ale Gilboa and received his undergraduate degree from Tufts University, majoring in religion, before entering JTS. He currently serves as the rabbinic intern at Sutton Place Synagogue in Manhattan, and we're thrilled to have him back here. As I said, he'll be delivering a class during Kiddush on civil discourse and Judaism as well. For those of you who can stay during Kiddush, I encourage you to join us for rabbinical student Blustein's class. Now, he gets a lot of credit because of the 4 rabbinical students who are visiting us, he was brave enough to choose February in Canada, so we give him credit for that, and I'm happy to welcome him to deliver the sermon this morning.
Thank you, Rabbi Grover. Several years ago, when I was a yeshiva student in Israel, I had the privilege to visit the Belz Hasidic community in Jerusalem. The Belz Hasidim have established an enormous synagogue in Jerusalem. The building, sometimes known as the Third Holy Temple, seats 10,000. On that Friday evening, on Erev Shabbat, it seemed to me that it was totally full. I arrived at the Belz Great Synagogue after sunset in the pitch black of a Jerusalem night. I found a seat and waited for the service to start. To my surprise, the Belzer Hasidim started the service with mincha, the afternoon service that's traditionally said only when there is still light outside. I sat there, confused. Picture it. Here I was, a yeshiva student, in one of the centers of the Hasidic world, and here were these Hasidim seemingly doing it wrong. You could not imagine my shock. But sitting there, surrounded by a sea of black and white, I thought it best just to join in. To my surprise, this was one of the most powerful prayer experiences that I have ever had. I felt a real connection in my prayer. All this despite davening at the wrong time. On reflection, I realized that while the Belzer Hasidim are learned enough to know the proper times for prayer, that to them was not the point. These Hasidim were not seeking meaning through proper practice according to the letter of the law, but were seeking meaning through something else, something rooted in experience. I think about my time with the Belzer Hasidim a lot as I go through rabbinical school and encounter Jews of all kinds who have a genuine desire to connect to Judaism. I am constantly meeting regular Jews, just like you and me, who are looking for meaning through the myriad avenues that Judaism provides. And I realize that just like the Belzer Hasidim find meaning less through their punctiliousness in law and more through Jewish experience, each of us seeks meaning in Judaism in our own way. Sure, some Jews are interested in halakha, in Jewish law. Some Jews have no interest in law, but care deeply about our history and about contextualizing the modern Jewish story. Some Jews are purely intellectuals and find meaning in the tradition of Jewish thought. Throughout my time in rabbinical school, I've had the opportunity to explore how to speak to Jews of all kinds. Let me take a moment to introduce myself. My name is, as Rabbi Grover said, Eitan Bloostein, and I have the privilege of being a rabbinical student at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City, one of the rabbinical schools of the conservative movement. I am in my 4th of 5 years, and over the years, I have discovered my own passions, my own ways of connecting to the Jewish tradition. Central to my identity as a future rabbi is my desire to tell the Jewish story, to transmit our tradition to as many Jews as will listen. Perhaps the most profound articulation of this kind of Jewish meaning-making is in this week's Parashat Bo. After God sends the final 3 plagues of locusts, darkness, and slaying the firstborn, the people are finally on their way out of Egypt. Then God commands the Israelites in the laws of the holidays of Passover, a commemoration of these events. Central to observing this holiday, memorializing the Exodus, is memory. The Torah tells us the famous commandment that Rabbi Grover mentioned earlier, V'higadata lebincha, and you shall tell this to your children. The rabbis tell this to your children and democratize it a little bit. They say that we must not only transmit the tradition from one generation to the next, but we must do it in a way that's not limited to our children. We must tell it to everyone. Everyone is commanded to say this to everyone else. Even if we are alone, we must tell ourselves this story. And the Torah says that what we say is ba'avur zeh, asa Adonai li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim. It is because of this that God took me out of Egypt. The this is not specified. What are we supposed to say? What tradition are we supposed to transmit to the next generation? For what reason did God bring us out of Egypt? There are three potential answers to this question. One commentary tells us that we are to teach that the reason we are brought out of Egypt is to fulfill God's commandments. To some, this answer represents the essence of what it means to be Jewish. Some Jews connect to God through the detailed learning and fulfillment or practice of mitzvot. For those Jews, we were brought out of Egypt to serve God through practicing halakha, Jewish law. This may be you. You might find meaning in analyzing the details of how to keep a kosher home or how to keep Shabbat and actually keeping them in their most ideal form. During Passover, for example, you might delight in the detailed rules of how to make our homes kosher for Passover and how exactly halakha tells us we should perform the ritual of the Seder. When I think about my role as a future rabbi, I realize that it is crucially important to be able to speak to Jews like you, who are in this population. Jewish law, after all, is one deeply important way to tell the story of our people, to transmit our tradition. Another commentary tells us that we should teach our fellow Jewish children and adults that the reason that we were brought out from Egypt is to experience freedom through our rituals each and every year. Indeed, there are those, like the Belzer Hasidim, for whom the spiritual journey is the central component of what it means to be Jewish. After all, our tradition teaches that each person must view themselves as if they personally were brought out from the land of Egypt. We are to try to imagine ourselves undergoing an entirely indescribable experience. This part of our Jewish practice tells us to experience the complexity of liberation, the feelings of deep joy at freedom from our Egyptian masters, and the awe at our new obligations to God. If this is why we were brought out of Egypt, then our tradition is primarily one of seeking spiritually meaningful experiences. Perhaps this is exactly how you connect to Judaism. Perhaps you are here at services, for example, for spiritual uplift or inspiration. Maybe you go to Jewish retreat centers or to Jewish summer camps for the same reason. These experiences of seeking Jewish spiritual fulfillment are another way of telling the Jewish story, of transmitting Judaism to the next generation. As I think about my future in the rabbinate, I realize how critical it is to be able to tell the Jewish story through experience, to build services and retreats that speak to this demographic of Jews that finds this the most meaningful. Experience is one important way to transmit our Jewish tradition. A third commentary tells us that we should tell our fellow Jews that the reason we were freed from Egypt is to tell the story itself. This tradition tells us that when we tell the story of the Exodus, we stimulate and awaken the minds of our fellow Jews. Telling our stories invites us to think about what it means to be Jewish today and to understand its significance. When we tell our stories, we can understand the anomaly and miracle that is the success of American and Canadian Jewish communities. We can appreciate the crucial importance of the state of Israel, and we can better understand who we are as Jews today in the broader Western society. Perhaps you relate to our tradition primarily through history and through our stories. Maybe you intently read along to the Torah read along during the Torah reading, trying to extract every drop of meaning from our holy books. Maybe you take extra time to tell your children or grandchildren about what Jewish life of old was like. Maybe you advocate for Israel by telling stories of the Shoah. Many Jews connect to God and to Judaism in this way. As I go through rabbinical school, I ask myself how I can tell the story of the Jews to the Jews who connect to Judaism this way. I realize how important it is to have the ability to tell our stories, to relate the history of the Jewish people. This, too, is a way of transmitting our tradition, telling the Jewish story. One of the joys of visiting Beth Tikvah here in Toronto is the ability to learn about all of the ways that Jews in North America relate to Judaism. Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, Zichrono Livracha, said that the Torah has so many locks and keys, and each key is individual. Each doorway is one's own. Our tradition, in other words, is vast and has many entry points. One of the jobs of rabbis is to help each person find their key to their door, to help people connect in their own way. When I think about my classmates at the seminary, I see a reflection of the North American Jewish community. I see people who have found keys and doors, entryways to our tradition in all sorts of ways. Musicians, talented speakers, gifted halachicists and Talmudists, Jewish historian, midrash nerds, and Bible geeks. While each of us can speak to the many aspects of our vast tradition, each of us, like everyone, develops an expertise or a corner of the tradition that we most love. I myself found my lock and key, my entryway into our tradition, through the intellectual pursuit of Talmud study. I find great meaning in the back and forth, the seesawing of ideas. Left in the hands of my classmates, the future of the conservative movement is bright. It is left in the care of talented people with a passion for transmitting our tradition in all of the ways that people can connect to it. And each of you has a door and a key. It is my hope that you can discover that door and learn to unlock it. Each of us is endowed with the sacred ability to be in relationship with God. Some of us have figured out what works best in our relationship with God, and others have not. In rabbinical school, my classmates and I learned to support you in this relationship and to elevate what works for each of you. It is within all of us. Let us continue to grow. Let us continue to develop a deep relationship to our tradition. And let us each tell our story in all of its forms to one another and especially to generations to come. Shabbat Shalom.